The year is 2012.
The stage at the Google I/O conference is electric.
A visionary founder steps out wearing a device that looks like it's straight out of a science fiction movie.
Moments later, the world holds its breath, watching a spectacular demonstration. Skydivers,
and climbers, all sharing their unique point of view.
Through a pair of glasses called Google Glass.
It was the promise of a revolution. The future was here.
A computer on your face, seamlessly integrated with your life, freeing you from the screen of your phone. The tech world went wild. The media celebrated it. Google Glass was destined to be humanity's next giant leap. Then silence. Silence.
Just a few years later, this multi-billion-dollar project quietly vanished from the public eye.
There was no farewell, no grand ceremony.
It simply faded away.
How did one of the most anticipated products of the decade become one of history's most iconic failed tech products? This isn't just a story of failure. This is a business case study. Point and an expensive lesson in innovation.
To understand the fall of Google Glass, we must look beyond the technology.
Technically, it was a marvel.
A tiny display, a camera, a microphone, all packed into a minimalist design.
But the fatal flaw of Google Glass wasn't in its circuitry. It was in the culture. It failed to solve a fundamental problem. The human problem. The biggest, most glaring reason. The instantly unlikable problem. The moment the first explorers wore glass out on the street.
A new nickname was born, Glasshole, roughly meaning the jerk in the glasses.
A glass wearer was suddenly seen as a second-rate James Bond, both arrogant and suspicious.
Were they secretly filming you picking your nose, perhaps?
Were they secretly filming you picking your nose, perhaps?
The always-on camera pointed squarely at other people's faces.
Shattered every minimal rule of politeness. It made those around them feel uneasy.
Tiffany, are you ready for the ultimate challenge? As if they were unwilling participants in a reality TV show they weren't getting paid for.
Apparently, Google had created a $1,500 annoyance-generating machine.
And no one wanted to pay to be on the receiving end
of death stares from their friends.
Reason number 2. a severe identity crisis.
What on earth was Google Glass? What was its purpose in life?
The hilarious part is, its own father, Google, was just stammering and scratching its head.
Was it a virtual assistant or a fashion accessory for futuristic cool kids? Or maybe a disguised spy camera?
It tried to be everything, like a greedy kid in a candy store.
And ended up being a master of absolutely nothing.
Consumers looked at it in utter confusion, thinking, so what do I even do with this thing?
When a product doesn't even know what it is, you can't be surprised when people send it packing.
And reason number 3, the fatal factor in every tech drama: market timing.
To put it bluntly, the world was not ready for Google Glass. The battery was pathetic, dying after just a few hours.
The design was clunky, making you look less like a secret agent and more like a clumsy intern from a spy comedy. Most importantly, society wasn't ready for the prospect of being secretly filmed while doing unfilmable things, like picking your nose.
Google threw a 2025 product into a clueless 2012 world.
This time jump sealed its fate, turning it into a legend of tech failures.
This theory posits that there's a huge chasm between early adopters and the mainstream market.
Google Glass is a perfect example. It successfully captured the explorers, the tech enthusiasts. But it fell straight into the chasm when trying to reach everyday users.
They didn't see the value. They only saw the problems.
As Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen said, customers don't buy products. They hire them to do a job.
Take photos, get directions, check email, translate.
Google Glass failed to prove what job it actually did for the average user.
This is the core lesson from its story, an unforgettable business case study.
So, what's the lesson here?
It's that tech innovation cannot exist in a vacuum.
It must be grounded in culture, society, and human needs.
A product, no matter how groundbreaking, will fail if it makes its user feel alienated or makes those around them uncomfortable.
But the story doesn't end here.
Because while Google failed, another company was watching, learning, and succeeding.
Meet Snap Inc., the parent company of Snapchat.
A few years after Google Glass faded into oblivion, Snap launched their own product, Spectacles.
But their approach was radically different.
And it's why they avoided the fate of one of the most ridiculed failed tech products.
Snap learned from Google's mistakes.
First, they had a clear and simple purpose. Spectacles were for recording short, fun video clips to share on Snapchat.
It wasn't trying to change the world. It was a toy.
Second, its design. They looked like a pair of fashionable, colorful, and playful sunglasses, not a device from the future.
They were friendly and approachable.
And most importantly, Snap tackled the privacy issue head-on. When you hit the record button on spectacles, a bright ring of LEDs would spin.
Clearly signaling to everyone around that you were filming.
A simple but incredibly smart solution.
It created transparency and respect, the very things Google Glass lacked.
Snap didn't create a Glasshole. They created a fun way to share a moment.
The contrast couldn't be clearer.
Google Glass was an example of a tech company being blindly confident, believing that if the technology was good enough, people would adapt.
It was a product failure born from hubris.
Spectacles, on the other hand, was an example of a company that understood its users and their social context.
They weren't selling a product, they were selling an experience.
They understood that success comes not just from what you make, but from how you make people feel. However, the story of Google Glass has a surprising final chapter.
It didn't completely die. After withdrawing from the consumer market, Google quietly restructured the project.
They realized that while it was a failed consumer product, it had immense potential in enterprise environments.
And so, the Glass Enterprise Edition was born.
In a warehouse, a worker could use it to see inventory lists hands-free.
In an operating room, a surgeon could consult medical records or collaborate with a remote expert without looking away from the patient.
In these contexts, all the problems of the consumer version vanished. Privacy was not a concern, and it had a... Google Glass finally found its home, not on the faces of the masses, but on the faces of professionals.
Ultimately, the story of Google Glass is a rich and complex business case study.
Google was so focused on creating the high-tech drill that it overlooked what hole the user actually wanted and whether they would feel comfortable drilling it in public.